Ouagadougou, a seemingly normal morning. The sky suddenly exploded with the roar of engines. One after another, giant transport planes landed. But this time, they were not carrying oil, not gold, not goods. They brought something unprecedented in history. Saudi Arabia led 42 countries to deploy the IMCTC force to Burkina Faso, and the target was not resources, but a person, Ibrahim Traoré. The question arose, why did a small country in the heart of the Sahel move the world? Why did a young leader, not yet 40 years old, become the center of a global alliance? This is not just a story about fighting terrorism. This is the rise of a new order. If you are convinced that this event will reshape Africa's destiny, show your support with a like and subscribe to follow our journey. According to reports from Riyadh, the forces of the Islamic Military Counterterrorism Coalition, IMCTC, composed of 42 member nations, have formally arrived in Burkina Faso. This deployment, the first for the IMCTC outside of the Middle East, represents a significant shift in the effort to combat jihadist organizations in the insurgency-ravaged Sahel region. A statement from Saudi Arabia emphasized, "The fight against terrorism no longer has borders." Burkina Faso today is also Riyadh, Islamabad, Cairo. Those words immediately echoed globally, signaling the expansion of influence far beyond the Gulf. But behind the anti-terrorism facade, there is a deeper truth. This is a reshaping of global power relations, where Africa is moving to the center. Ouagadougou is no longer as quiet as before. The sky, which was used to the sound of birds and the wind of the Sahel, is now shaken by the roar of jet engines. Huge transport planes flying the Saudi Arabian flag landed one after another on the runway, their iron bodies gleaming in the bright sunlight. Hundreds of soldiers emerged from the aircraft, equipped with armor and weapons, under the flags of Arabia, Pakistan, Egypt, and Nigeria, presenting a historic scene. A coalition of 42 nations gathered in a small country to defend one individual, Ibrahim Traoré. The world had never witnessed such an event. Not the United Nations, not NATO, not the African Union, but a military bloc led by Saudi Arabia carrying the political, religious, and military weight of 42 countries based in Burkina Faso. People asked each other, what is going on here? Why is the Sahel the center? International reporters jostled at the airport, cameras panning quickly to capture every face, every badge, every fluttering flag. In those looks, there was surprise, skepticism, and even fear. Why? Because Burkina Faso was only mentioned in international news as a poor land swept by terrorism turned into a buffer zone between the great powers. But today, Burkina Faso is no longer a peripheral land. It has transformed into the focal point of a new international rivalry. The critical question is what led Saudi Arabia to select Burkina Faso? What enabled Traoré, a leader under the age of 40, to persuade 42 nations to support him? The answer lies in his bold choice to separate from the West. When Paris ordered, he cut. When Washington threatened, he was silent but steadfast. When the European Union sanctioned, he sought other allies. Traoré decided Burkina Faso was no longer a pawn on someone else's chessboard, but a player. And it was that determination that opened the door for Riyadh. Saudi Arabia understood that a rising Africa needed partners who respected its sovereignty without imposing conditions. Unlike the West's poison aid packages, Riyadh offered what Burkina Faso needed most: unfettered security. Imagine a land that had been forgotten suddenly became the meeting place of thousands of soldiers from across the Muslim world. They arrived not to raise the Saudi flag, but to establish their camp alongside the flag of Burkina Faso. This sight caused unease among many Western observers as it signaled a shift in global power. In Paris, an emergency meeting was quickly called at the Élysée Palace. Security advisors admitted, "We have lost Burkina Faso." In Washington, Pentagon generals asked, "Is Riyadh building a new NATO on African soil?" In Brussels, the whispers were, "If this model spreads to Mali, Niger, What will the EU have left to cling to? Because the truth is obvious. This is not just a military operation, it is a political message. Burkina Faso is not just accepting troops, it is redefining its future. Security must be linked to sovereignty. Traore said, "We do not need protection, we need cooperation." And by setting foot in the Sahel, 42 countries have shown that they are ready to listen. If you see Traore's courageous refusal to yield to former colonial powers as a pivotal moment for Africa, please share your opinions in the comments section. Your input will contribute to this growing movement. But consider this more deeply. What motivated Traoré to take such a significant risk? Because he knew that history would never change if we continued on the same path. France promised aid, but that aid was tied to debt. The US promised training, but that training was tied to control. The EU promised security, but that security was tied to political conditions. Africa is used to gift packages that tie it together. Now Burkina Faso has chosen a different path, finding a partner who is willing to come without the chains. That doesn't mean there aren't risks. Saudi Arabia certainly has interests, but the difference is that this is a meeting of needs and respect, not imposition. As the IMCTC armored vehicles drove through the capital, children in Burkina Faso lined the streets waving. No one felt a sense of foreign occupation. Instead, they viewed the soldiers as allies, not conquerors. For a brief period, Ouagadougou appeared to be the new center of a developing global order. The headlines appeared in the African press. The Sahel is no longer alone. Burkina Faso is no longer alone. And from here, a new narrative began, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire continent. It established the groundwork for a changed Africa, an Africa that dared to choose, dared to refuse, dared to stand side by side. If Burkina Faso, a small resource, poor country besieged by terrorism, dared to choose that path, what would other countries think? Mali, Niger, Chad, even Nigeria, would they follow suit? That question made the world tremble. For once, Africa is no longer dependent. The global balance will change. The day Saudi Arabia sent its military to Burkina Faso was seen by many experts as a pivotal strategic moment. For the people of Burkina Faso, however, it meant something much more personal. It was confirmation that their leader, Traoré, had powerful allies. And for Traoré himself, it was a message to the world. Burkina Faso had stood up, and this time, it would not fall. In the middle of Ouagadougou Central Square, an unprecedented scene unfolded. Thousands of soldiers from 42 countries lined up in neat formations. From Saudi soldiers in desert armor to Nigerian fighters scarred by Boko Haram battles. From Egyptian officers who had fought in the Sinai Desert to Pakistani units that had faced al-Qaeda head-on. But in the center of the square, only one flag flew, the red, green, gold flag of Burkina Faso. That flag was not obscured by any other flag. All forces from Riyadh to Islamabad, from Dar es Salaam to Khartoum, were positioned under its authority. At that moment, history was subtly altered. Burkina Faso, a nation often seen as insignificant, became the focus of global attention and respect. The question that rang out from international observers was, why did 42 countries agree to stand under the flag of Burkina Faso and not the flag of Saudi Arabia, the force leading the IMCTC? The answer was clear. This was not a protection. It was an alliance of equals. Saudi Arabia understood that if it placed its flag at the top, everything would become a new version of what the West did in the Sahel: aid for control, troops for dependence. But this time that changed. Traoré himself set the conditions. Burkina Faso does not want mercenaries. Burkina Faso accepts only companions. And Riyadh agreed. It was a moment that redefined their partnership, based not on dominance, but on mutual respect. No one, in fact, disputed Riyadh's own motivations. They needed to assert their global leadership role in the Muslim world. They wanted to prove to the West, we are the pillar of the fight against terrorism. They wanted to expand their influence into Africa, a land that had been neglected. But there was a difference. Riyadh brought not only guns, but also a soft message: respect. While NATO's deployments often attach economic conditions, the IMCTTC came with a simple statement: we are here to support, not to rule. That made a deadly difference because the Burkina people, after decades of deception, felt for the first time that they were no longer prey. Here, the tangible force of military equipment combined with the intangible strength of mutual trust. When these two elements came together, they formed a novel kind of influence, one that was no longer in the hands of the West. Africa was once described as a region lacking strong leadership. It was simply a backyard where great powers experimented with military models, aid, or simply exploited resources. But with the image of soldiers from 42 countries standing under the flag of Burkina Faso, that notion is turned upside down. Africa is no longer a blank canvas. Africa has become a guiding ground. The Ouagadougou event was not just a show of force, but the beginning of a new principle. Whoever wants to be present in Africa must be present under an African flag. That was unprecedented, and it made the West tremble. In Paris, the press unanimously asked, "Is this the end of French influence in the Sahel?" Former military officials expressed concern that if Burkina Faso could draw in 42 nations, Mali, Niger, and Chad might do the same. This could create a chain reaction, erasing 60 years of French presence in a short time. In Washington, the Pentagon's unease was palpable. A leaked confidential report stated, IMCTC is becoming a shadow NATO, but this time the U.S. is not in control. What does that mean? It means that the global balance is shifting and the U.S. no longer has a monopoly. If you believe that the Burkina Faso flag flying among 42 countries is not just an image, but a statement for all of Africa, share this video with your friends, because it is these small actions that multiply the spirit of freedom. In the center of the square, Ibrahim Traoré stepped out. No heavy armor, no lavish escort. He stood straight, looked straight ahead, and spoke slowly. Burkina Faso does not require anyone to bestow its freedom upon it. Burkina Faso only needs partners to help safeguard the freedom it already possesses. These words created a hush across the square, which was then broken by chants of his name. He didn't need to be loud or intimidating. Just one sentence was enough to turn the image of 42 countries into a steel circle around Burkina Faso. And that circle the world has no way to break. Africa is used to aid packages with conditions attached. But this is the first time a small country has received military support without having to sign a paper to sell its soul. The difference is Saudi Arabia does not want to rule Burkina Faso. They want to accompany Traoré to enhance their own prestige. And in that bargain, both sides benefit, but neither side loses its soul. The day 42 countries stood under the flag of Burkina Faso, the world realized that a new period had begun, a period where the African flag is raised high, not lowered, a period where assistance is a tool for defending sovereignty, not a form of control. And in that era, Ibrahim Traoré became a symbol, the men who dared to turn a poor country into the center of a global alliance. Ouagadougou was now more than just a capital. It had become the epicenter of global geopolitics. Every street, every square, every emergency session of parliament reflected the gazes of Washington, Paris, Riyadh, Moscow, Beijing. Burkina Faso was no longer the foreign land of the Sahel, but the battlefield where the 21st century order would be shaped. Engines roared in the night sky. Saudi transport planes continued to land, carrying military equipment, air defense radars, intelligence advisors. But only a short distance away, the Russian installation was also active, with a group of former Wagner instructors now designated as official military staff. In a different area, Chinese specialists discreetly managed surveillance drone operations under the guise of civilian technical assistance. Burkina Faso, a small nation, had suddenly become a convergence point for four major powers. In the meeting rooms at the United Nations, the debates lasted until midnight. The U.S. delegation accused Saudi and Russia are turning Burkina Faso into a new cauldron, threatening global peace. The Saudi delegation responded, "We act at the official invitation to fight terrorism. It is the West that abandoned the Sahel, leaving a void for chaos." Russia asserted, "Burkina Faso has the right to invite anyone to protect them. Whoever opposes it wants to maintain neo-colonial chains." Meanwhile, China kept a cold tone. "We only invest in infrastructure, provide technology, and respect sovereignty. Whoever is concerned is afraid of losing their own interests." The whole world was seething, but in the center of that attention, Ibrahim Traoré, the familiar brown hat man, remained quiet but resolute. Presidential advisors were split in their opinions. One group favored strengthening relationships with Saudi Arabia to gain financial support, weaponry, and backing from Arab nations. The other expressed concern that becoming too aligned with Riyadh could turn Burkina Faso into a pawn for Wahhabism, causing it to lose its unique revolutionary character. The pro-Russian camp insists that only Moscow dares to directly oppose the West. They remind Traoré that without the Russian shield, NATO would crush Burkina Faso in a day. But others worry that Russia is only looking for a foothold in Africa to counter Ukraine, not really for Ouagadougou's future. China, with its huge capital, offers a promise. "We will not interfere in politics. Let us build roads, dams, and airports. In 10 years, Burkina will become the logistics center of West Africa." It sounds like a neutral solution, but Traoré understands that every bridge China builds has a debt bond. So what is the alternative? While the major powers negotiate, the youth of Burkina Faso are protesting in the streets. They are displaying signs that read, "No Saudis, no NATO, no Russia, no China. Burkina for the Burkinabe people." A roar from tens of thousands of throats. The image spread across social networks. World capitals were stunned. While the adults fought for influence, the young generation stood up to assert their right to self-determination. A 19-year-old girl shouted into the camera, "We are not dying to become the pawns of Riyadh or Washington. We are fighting for our parents, for our land, for Burkina's freedom." The words became a slogan printed on posters, a hashtag, a graffiti wall, in the middle of Ouagadougou, Mersh Bikinaris. During the tense nights, Traoré's satellite phone rang constantly. Calls came from Riyadh, Moscow, Beijing, and Paris. Each conversation was a mix of assurances and warnings. If you decline to cooperate, your aid will be terminated. If you continue in this direction, economic sanctions will follow. If you don't choose sides, Burkina will be crushed between the two blocks. Traoré heard everything. Then he quietly replied, "Burkina is not a chess piece. We are players on the chessboard." The words revealed by an assistant immediately spread throughout the international media. It became the manifesto of a new era, a small country daring to challenge the rules of the giants. The situation was tense. On the northern border, terrorist groups received mysterious supplies and suddenly increased their attacks. In the capital, parallel protests took place. One group demonstrated in favor of the Saudis. Another waved the Russian flag, while the younger generation demanded that Burkina remain for the Burkinabe. The UN mission issued a warning about the possibility of civil war. The French intelligence agency reported a silent coup attempt. Washington discussed plans to deploy a peacekeeping force, in essence, to impose soft control. Ouagadougou, a red dusty city, has suddenly become a fuse that can set the world on fire. One night, Traoré stepped out onto the balcony of the presidential palace, looking down at the square filled with cheering youth. He clenched his fists and whispered, "If they believe in me, I will not be allowed to yield." The old guard asked, "Which side will you choose, Mr. President?" Traoré turned his eyes burning. "I choose Burkina and only Burkina." The response, though seemingly straightforward, represented a solemn vow of unwavering commitment. Western media dubbed Traoré the little tiger challenging the jungle. The Arab press referred to him as Riyadh's Sahel brother. The Russians praised him as the anti-NATO warrior. China called him the nucleus of stability in West Africa. But in reality, Traoré was no one's shadow. He is building a new model, a small country with a voice equal to that of a great power, because behind him are millions of young people ready to sacrifice. The whole world is nervous because everyone knows that if Burkina Faso holds its ground, it will be a punch straight to the heart of the old order. And then intelligence suddenly leaks out. Some generals in the Burkina army are secretly in contact with foreign missions. Some are getting funds from Riyadh, others are pledging their allegiance to the West, a few are shifting their support toward Moscow. The threat of internal betrayal is growing. This foreshadows an impending storm of treachery. The fifth part concludes dramatically. Amidst it all, Traoré stands tall, preparing to enter the fiercest challenge of his life. But history has never rolled out the red carpet for those who go against the old power. While the Islamist army from Riyadh was still camped in Ouagadougou, while the Arab and African media were still joyfully praising a new alliance for peace, in the dark, a headwind was rising. People began to see unusual signs. Some of Burkina Faso's weapons depots were suddenly destroyed by technical accidents. Some key military communication lines were suddenly disrupted. Secret meetings of generals were leaked after only a few hours. All attention was focused on one question. Was a clandestine force operating within Burkina Faso's own military? Then the startling information emerged. A shipment of military aid from Saudi Arabia, including reconnaissance drones and jamming equipment, suddenly disappeared en route from Dar to Ouagadougou. The international press reported looting by rebels, but insiders whispered another theory. It was not rebels, but a secret network with people in the Burkina army assisting. The question became more painful when a number of senior officers suddenly requested long-term leave or disappeared without explanation. A leaked report from the security agency showed that at least 3 officers who had been trained in Paris, who had previously kept quiet, now appeared on the list of suspects. And then that fateful night came. While the Saudi army had just finished establishing a base north of Ouagadougou, a massive blast rocked the outskirts of the city. The entire city remained on high alert throughout the night. The government of Burkina Faso initially labeled it a terrorist act, but the discovery of metal fragments indicated they were military-grade explosives that could only have been moved by individuals within the system. People began to wonder, was the Saudi presence a protective umbrella or an excuse for underground forces to penetrate deeper into Burkina Faso? On the streets, whispers became a blunt cry. We fight terrorism, but who fights traitors? That was the unexpected twist. Burkina Faso was facing enemies not only from outside its borders, but also from within its own heart. A dual war outside against the specter of jihad, inside against the daggers hidden in military uniforms. In Riyadh, strategists could not hide their anxiety. If Burkina were to fracture from within, the entire Saudi soft power expansion plan in Africa would be reduced to ashes. As for the people of Burkina, the question is now more pressing. Are they sacrificing their autonomy for a military partnership? Or are they inadvertently letting danger into their own country? A significant historical moment has been unveiled. From here, the story is no longer simply Saudi Arabia helping Burkina Faso, but a cruel chess game. Who really holds the soul of this country, the people, or anonymous forces? Ouagadougou is no longer a small capital in the heart of the Sahel. After the 42-nation army left, the memories of those boiling days and nights are still imprinted on every face. Every step the people of Burkina Faso have witnessed when the world is surprised when the superpower is still hesitant. This land becomes the convergence point of human history. And Ibrahim Traoré, in the voice of thousands of young people, sent a shocking message. We do not request peace. We forge it with our own efforts, intelligence, and conviction. We do not await justice. We create our own. These words are not just for Burkina Faso. They are addressed to Nigeria, Ghana, Congo, Algeria, South Africa. They are also addressed to the young people of Vietnam, Palestine, Chile, where the desire for freedom still burns. The 21st century is rewriting the map of power. Burkina Faso does not kneel and Africa will never bow again. Share, comment, Let the world know a new era has begun in the heart of the Sahel.